أعوذ بالله من الشيطان العليم الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم بسم الله وصلى الله على محمد وآله وفوض أمري إلى الله إن الله بصير بالعباد فوقاه الله سيئات ما مكروا لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إن كنت من الظالمين فاستجبنا له ونجيناه من الغم وكذلك ننجي المؤمنين حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل فانقلبوا بنعمة من الله وفضل لم يمسسهم سوء ما شاء الله لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله ما شاء الله لا ما شاء الناس ما شاء الله وإن كره الناس حسبي رب من المربوبين حسبي خالق من المخلوقين حسبي الرازق من المرزوقين حسبي الله رب العالمين حسبي من هو حسبي حسبي من لم يزل حسبي حسبي من كان مسكنت لم يزل حسبي حسبي الله لا إله إلا هو عليه توكلت وهو رب العرش العظيم
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين بالقاسم محمد وأهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا أما بعد فقد قال أمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب عليه الصلاة والسلام في كلام له بذم اختلاف العلماء في الفتيا وفيهم يذم أهل الرأي ويكل أمر الحكم في أمور الدين للقرآن ترد على أحدهم القضية في حكم من الأحكام صلوات الله محمد وآل محمد. Alhamdulillah, we finished khutbah number 17, the three parts of it. And we are on to khutbah number 18. Inshallah, this will be two-part khutbah. And some of the commentators believe that this is actually the continuation of khutbah number 17, as the theme is pretty much the same. The theme in the previous khutbah, if you remember, Imam was criticizing the judges, those who were sitting on the seat of judge, and mainly or namely Abu Hasan Ash'ari and Qadi Shurai and these personalities. So Imam criticized them, spoke against them and their mishaps and the reasons that they brought about problems onto the Muslim Ummah. So this is basically the continuation of the previous sermon, where now Imam focuses on the disagreement between themselves as well. So within them, while they are causing this fitna, but within these judges, when a discussion was brought in front of one of them, he would give fatwa in one direction. When the same discussion was brought in front of another one, he would give fatwa according to his whims and his own understanding. Now, don't take this khutbah of Imam Ali and implement this in today's marja'iyat, saying, oh, isn't the maraji doing the same thing? We have differences of opinion in maraji. That one marja says this is halal and the other one says this is precautionary halal. The other one says no, it's haram. Or one says this is mustahab muakkad. The other one says no, it is forbidden. So we have these differentiating fatwa amongst the maraji today as well. The reason today we have this difference of opinion is firstly because none of these maraji, they are not infallible. So well, the quzat at that time, they weren't infallible either, true. But at least there was the presence of an infallible imam amongst them. But whereas these maraji, they are living in the time of the ghibat of imam, and therefore it is possible for them to make a mistake. They don't feel pride over the fact that they've made a mistake. They don't brag over the fact that they've made a mistake. It's a very difficult verdict to pass at times. But nonetheless, they go ahead and do their job of ijtihad. So we'll touch briefly in this discussion on the concept of ijtihad as well, and the two other concepts that are widely used in the Sunni fiqh, namely qiyas is used in the Sunni fiqh, istihsan is used in Sunni fiqh, and birra'i is used in Sunni fiqh, and of course ijtihad and the current meaning of that in the Sunni fiqh. So Imam begins وَمِن كَلَامٍ لَهُ regarding the condemnation of the disagreements among the scholars in the verdict. So if you look at this khutbah in a glance, so we've been given khutbah at a glance. This sermon is considered by some researchers to be part of the previous sermon, as I mentioned, from the writings of Syed Rizvi. The content and theme of this sermon also supports this notion, where if you have the contents of the previous sermon in mind, you'll walk right into this one. As the previous one discussed, unqualified and the incompetent judges whose improper judgment jeopardized the security of people's lives and their property, becoming the source of numerous societal corruptions. In this sermon, there will be mention of judges who rely on weak, baseless foundations of analogy, qiyas, personal opinion, rai, and preference, istihsan. This is better, so this is how they go. Deriving incorrect conclusion from them. We'll give example as to how could this be problematic. Worse still, their leaders consider the contradictory opinion of all of them to be judgment of Allah. This is where the problem is. They say, well, he said A is halal, it's the judgment of Allah. He says A is haram, it is also a judgment of Allah. He said A is mustahab, it is also a judgment of Allah. So this is where the problem lies. So Imam ﷺ, with a highly precise analysis and a well-structured and reasoned argument that he will present, refutes the theory of tasweeb, the concept of tasweeb, with swad. Te, swad, waw, ye, be, tasweeb. The notion of that all the contradictory rulings issued by judges are correct. You hear this towards the end, Wallahu alam bis sawab, right? Bis sawab with the swad, it's the same word. So Imam clears the path for arriving at the truth regarding this significant Islamic issue in which many have been left bewildered. So in this sermon, there are three sections. We will try and cover the first section today, and inshallah tomorrow, or next week, we will inshallah cover the second section and the third section as well. The first section discusses the approach of judges who operate under the concept of tasweeb and consider all the contradictory rulings to be the judgment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So here, if I can walk you through the kalam of Imam alayhi salatu, he begins by saying, if you look at this, تَرِدُ عَلَىٰ أَحَدِهِمُ الْقَضِيَةِ. There's really, this part is actually the explanation. This does not require any explanation. This is how clear it is when you look at the translation of it. He said, تَرِدُ عَلَىٰ أَحَدِهِمُ الْقَضِيَّةُ فِي حُكْمٍ مِنَ الْأَحْكَامِ فَيَحْكُمُ فِيهَا بِرَأْيِهِ. When a problem is put before any one of them, he passes judgment on it from his imagination. ثم ترد تلك القضية بعينها على غيره فيحكم فيها بخلاف قوله. When the exactly same problem is placed in front of another one of them, he passes the opposite verdict. ثم يجتمع القضاة بذلك عند إمامهم الذي استقضاهم فيصوب آراءهم جميعا. Then judges go to the chief. So there's always Qaziul Quzat. They go to the chief who had appointed them and confirms all the verdicts. Although ilahuhum wahid wa nabiyyuhum wahid wa kitabuhum wahid. While their Allah is one and the same, their prophet is one and the same, and their book Quran is the one and the same. So when you have these three things lined up, there's really no reason for you to have disagreement. And then you shouldn't be calling this to be the kalam of Allah or to be in line with the judgment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So let's get right into this first segment. Why all disagreement? Why do you see disagreement? Imam begins his speech by sometimes a case and issue is presented to one of them and he judges according to his whims and his rai. The moment Imam says he does things according to his rai is the moment of problem. If anyone does things according to their opinion pertaining to the religion, right away that is a matter of extreme difficulty. Hadith says, Man fassara al-Qur'ana bi-ra'yihi. Whoever does the tafsir of Quran according to their rai, opinion, فَلْيَتَبَوَّعُوا مَقْعَدَهُ فِي النَّارِ. Their final abode is the fire of Jahannam. Clear, straightforward. There's no ifs and buts in between. Oh, no, this person will... Right away, Jahannam. The one who does the tafsir of Quran according to their own whims and according to their own opinion. So then, Imam says, when you take him to one judge, he says this. Take him to another judge, he says this. When they all bring it to their chief, and he also approves all of these contradictory rulings and validates and approves all of the judgments despite the fact that the Lord is one, the Prophet is one, and the Quran is one. Although the scenario may seem strange to many and perhaps difficult for some to believe, that individuals could consider all these contradictory rulings as correct and deem all of them as divine judgments. That's where the problem is. You can call this to be your opinion, but not necessarily go ahead and associate this with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is a reality among certain groups of Ahl Sunnah. They believe in such beliefs based on the doctrine of tasweeb. So it's a little technical discussion, so I won't go too much in details of it, but just quick explanation. Validating all opposing verdicts as correct. This is correct, this is correct, this is correct. So do we not do the same thing? For example, if one marja says that, and I'm making it up, that lobster is haram, well, majority of them say that. Another one comes and says, no, lobster is halal, for example. As a precaution, is haram, for example. Another one says, no, lobster is halal, for example. Why? Because Sunnis, Ahl Sunnah, they have riwayat under the ayat of Quran which says everything in the water is halal for you to consume. Whatever is in the water is halal. Allah has created everything under the water to be halal. This is the ayat of Quran. So they take this ayat and they say, blanket, everything under the water is now halal. Whether it be crabs, whether it be squids, whether it be fish, whether it be any other thing that is found under the water is what? Halal for you to consume. Well, reality is that is not the case for us. We can only eat fish, and that too a specific type of one. For them, they can eat anything and everything. So I don't know if I mentioned this before. Once we were in Mecca for Hajj, and when we arrived at the buffet in our hotel, there were all these types of crabs and lobsters and everything sitting in the buffet. And so some of our people asked, well, can we eat this? I said, no, you can't eat this. He said, we're in the holy land of Mecca, performing Hajj, and the food is being served by the Muslims. We can't eat that. I said, no, it's haram for us. because lobster is not permissible. So there's a possibility one says it's halal, the other one says, according to his deduction from the rules, it's haram. So we say, well, you follow your marja, he follows his marja. And then we all deal with it in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tomorrow. But we're not going to say, well, this is also right and this is also right and third opinion also right. Imam delivers the first blow to the foundation of this flawed thinking. Ilahuhum wahid, nabiyuhum wahid, and kitabuhum wahid. All three are the same. Undoubtedly, from the one God, for a single issue, only a single ruling is issued. Because He is all-knowing of all realities, fully aware of everything without omission or deficiency. He establishes a single ruling for an issue based on the benefits or harms inherent in it. And we'll give examples of that. But Imam explains, Allah neither makes mistake nor forgets. Forgetfulness cannot touch His divine essence. And therefore He does not regret, and nothing previously unknown becomes apparent to Him with the passage of time. So for example, for us, we were in dark for the first 10 years of certain scenario. Now things become clear for us. Now we have a different thinking and different understanding of it. Therefore, the source of disagreement cannot be from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Source of disagreement is from you. Don't associate that with Prophet and Allah. I haven't even gone to the Prophet. Imam also included Prophet. The source of disagreement cannot be Quran. Both of you cannot say, we arrived at this fatwa based on the ayat of Quran. He arrived at this fatwa based on the ayat of Quran. That is not possible. You arrived at it because of your own personal opinion, not according to the ayat of Quran. That's what is being said. Given that Prophet is also one, Nabi, our Prophet, the seal of Anbiya, and he is infallible in all matters, especially in conveying the divine rulings that he has received from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He communicates Allah's commands without any deficiency or alteration. وَلَوْ تَقَوَّلَ بَعْدَ الْأَقَاوِيلِ وَلَوْ تَقَوَّلَ عَلَيْنَا بَعْدَ الْأَقَاوِيلِ. Quran says, O Prophet, if you were to fabricate anything that we have said to you, we will grab you by your neck. Right? We'll cut off your aorta. These are the ayat of Quran. This is the, consequence of you fabricating anything. So not that Rasulullah is scared or anything, no. With this sort of command from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's given notion and to everyone else not to associate anything with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So therefore, he cannot be the source of these difficulties. You can say, well, I derived it from the kalam of Rasulullah, so Rasulullah meant this. His message is also unified. Their law, the program, and the code is also unified. The scripture, the Quran, has neither been altered nor corrupted. It originates from the pure spring of divine revelation, is accessible to all of them, and is universally accepted. So there is no conflict or contradiction in the contents of Quran, for it is from Allah. As the word states, had there been from anyone other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, la fasadata. If there was from anyone else, they would have definitely find what? Discrepancy. Chapter 4, ayat number 82. So thus the differences do not arise from their divine scripture. This statement serves as an introduction to the explanation provided in the second section, inshallah we'll get to that, which clarifies that these disagreements stem from their own flawed thoughts and their thinking, their own flawed thinking, and this inadequacies of their reasonings. In other words, these contradictions are the result of their erroneous interpretations and intellectual shortcomings. That's what it is emerging from. And then they go ahead and blame it on Quran and Hadith and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This remark is essentially a brief but a general response to the concept of tasweeb. As I mentioned the word tasweeb before, validating all conflicting rulings to be correct. That's the concept. Imam provides a detailed and eloquent refutation of this concept in the next section, presenting the argument with the utmost clarity. The explanation regarding qiyas and istihsan and ijtihad. So in reality, the belief in tasweeb, and I'll conclude with this, so we won't go too much in details, and the correctness of contradictory opinions. So we were discussing something regarding the building code, and one person said, no, this is now how it's done, this is how it should be. Another person came and gave their own opinion. Third person came and gave their own opinion. Fourth, if there was 4 different contradictory opinions given regarding the code of the building, and then, we were to go ahead and follow all 4 of them, what will happen? We will ruin the building. We will cause damage to it. That's what it'll eventually do to it. There will really be no credibility and value left in it once all 4 opinions are implemented. So there's only one that is correct amongst these 4. If that is true, that is one is correct amongst these 4. So that credible source has to be the expert in it. Similarly, these people who are passing judgments, they weren't experts in the Islamic field. And therefore, they were concocting, they were creating these things based on, what they had assumed was correct. So Imam gives example of that over here. He says that this is actually a deviation from the principle of Tawheed and an inclination towards a type of shirk. Tawheed in divinity introduces God as singular. Tawheed in prophethood considers the divinely chosen Rasul in every era to be one. And Tawheed in Sharia holds the heavenly scripture or the divine scripture to be one. This is Tawheed and the different scenarios of Tawheed. Tawheed in Allah, Tawheed in the Nubuwwat and the Risalat of Rasul, and Tawheed in the scripture, which is only one, and that is Quran. Therefore, the inclination toward multiplicity of rulings, which is nothing but shirk. So eventually, the Sunni jurists, to escape this deadlock and impasse, they were compelled to resort to qiyas, analogy, istihsan, juristic, preference, and ijtihad, in a specific sense of legislating by jurists. They divided issues into 2 categories. One is mansus, which is issues with explicit text from Quran and Hadith. So when you hear the word, this is mansus, which means it has a nas. Nas means text. Text means that which is in Quran or Hadith. Or ma la nassa fihi, issues without explicit text. So they divided the categories of 2. One that has a text in the form of Quran and Hadith. Ma la nassa fihi, the second which has no nas. There's no text that we can refer back to. So in mansus, they issued rulings in accordance with the text. So for example, the ayat of Quran says, Aqim as-salat, this is salat is wajib. Ayat of Quran says, Kutiba alaykum as-siyam, fasting is wajib. And all the other things that give zakat and khums and all these other things. The ayat of Quran says, when the ayat is there, that means there's a nas. There's a text, and so they pass ruling based on that. However, ma la nassa fihi, the thing which upon there is no nas, and there isn't any guidance or any hadith or ayat, they oppose the solution, they proposed rather the solution of qiyas. They'll go ahead and use qiyas over there. If there's no ayat of Quran in the usage of this thing right here in my hand, what am I going to introduce? Qiyas, the analogy. And for instance, if a ruling exists about prayer, they would analyze or they will analyze or they will use the analogy of fasting to it. That if a ruling exists about Hajj, they would go ahead and use the same analogy towards Umrah as well. Because we don't have a ayat of Quran regarding Umrah explicitly the way we have for Hajj, we're going to go ahead and use this same analogy and go ahead and analogize this as well. So, and when there was no similar or comparable case, so there are a lot of times there isn't any comparable case. You can't refer to this thing with something where there's no resemblance with it. Then there will be, problem for them. So when they couldn't compare anything, considering the benefit or harm of the matter, they would formulate a ruling or a law for it. This process was then termed as what? Ijtihad, in their meaning. Where there's no nas and there's no comparison. So first you find nas. You couldn't find any nas, you go to qiyas. You couldn't do any qiyas, what do you do then? Ijtihad. That, in this specific sense. So in clearer terms, some explicitly stated, whatever does not have an explicit text in Islam essentially has no specific ruling, and it is the duty of the jurist to legislate for it by relying on conjecture and evaluating benefits and harms. So they'll see what are the benefits and what are the harms. They should determine what they see as the closer to benefit and introduce it as a divine ruling. They say, well, no, there's benefit to it. So we're going to consider this to be divine, although there's no nas for it, and we're going to legalize this. This is, in this way, ijtihad, in the sense of legislation by jurists, became common among them. They justified this with the principle, so that the mujtahid doesn't feel bad either. It says, lil musibe ajran, wa lil mukhti'e ajrun wahid. The one who is correct earns 2 rewards, and the one who makes an error earns 1 reward. So if I, as a mujtahid, go ahead and pass a judgment which doesn't have any hadith, doesn't have any ayat, and I could not do qiyas either, I'm going to go ahead and do ijtihad and say, this is halal for you. You can use this thing. If mujtahid is making a mistake, he gets 1 reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But if he lands the ruling as correct, this is what Allah meant it anyway, then he gets 2 rewards for that, because he was courageous enough to go ahead and pass such a judgment. Now, of course, we refute this, because then you open the door of ijtihad into other arenas of life, which is such as imamat and khilafat and all those other things. And the mistakes made by the khulafa of that time, they fall under the category of ijtihad. Believe it or not, Yazid's act against Imam Hussein was based on his ijtihad. So if Yazid was wrong, according to some of them, if Yazid was wrong, he still gets 1 reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if he was right, na'udhu billah, then he gets twice the reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for killing Imam Hussein. So that's how the concept of ijtihad would then develop. Then Imam gets to the next part, which says, فَأَمَرَهُمُ اللَّهُ سُبْحَانَهُ. These, discrepancies are indefensible. Inshallah, we'll talk about that next week. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillah rabbil alameen. Yes.
When these guys were passing all these erroneous judgments,
Mm-hmm.
were they aware that Imam Ali was there, and rather than consulting him, they were just passing their judgment?
So they, of course, knew the wujud of Imam. There's no doubt about that. It's just that they don't consider him to be mansus min Allah, that he's not a divinely appointed leader. They consider that after Rasulullah left this world, he didn't really appoint any. Up until Rasulullah, they were united. But after him, there isn't anyone infallible as Rasulullah was. And so Imam Ali is around, but they're passing these judgments. That's why Imam is speaking about it. So during his life, in the time of the first 3 khulafa, Imam made many of these statements. And especially in the 4 or 5 years of Imam's own khilafat, he uttered many of these things which had already been done, now trying to rectify, because now at least he has power, he has the mimbar where he can address, so that everybody knows and sees the dark passage that Islam had just gone through. So this is basically cleanup work which is being done by Imam alayhi salatu wasalam over here. Yes.
Nas is basically
Nas means a text which is, either from Quran or Hadith. So Hadith doesn't have to be the divine, but if it's associated with the Prophet or Imams, then of course it is divine.